Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have.
Recently, an advanced AI system was used to decode the contents of a Sumerian tablet, cataloged as CBS 10673, also known as the Eridu Genesis. For more than a century, it rested among thousands of other artifacts, casually labeled as nothing more than a handwriting exercise by an ancient student. Yet what the AI uncovered reveals something far more brutal: a cold administrative record of the darkest moment in human history. Why would a text this disturbing be treated as a classroom exercise? What devastating truth was hidden in plain sight within this tablet? The fragment at Nippur. Our story does not begin inside a modern laboratory. It begins beneath the blistering sun of southern Iraq at the end of the 19th century, in the 1890s. The University of Pennsylvania launched the first American archaeological expedition to Mesopotamia, with the goal of excavating Nippur, the most sacred city of ancient Sumer. Nippur was not a political capital like Babylon or Ur. It was a religious center, the Vatican of the ancient world, home to the great temple Ekur dedicated to Enlil, the god of wind and supreme command. For more than a decade, archaeological teams dug through tons of soil, sand, and crumbled brick. They uncovered temples, city walls, and dried-out canals. Yet, the most important discovery, the one that would permanently alter our understanding of human intellectual history, lay in a residential area that appeared entirely ordinary, far from the main temple complex. This area became known as the Scribal Quarter. When archaeologists dismantled the mud brick walls of the narrow houses in this district, they were stunned by what they found. Clay tablets were everywhere. They were not scattered at random. They were stacked in piles, packed inside containers, or neatly arranged on collapsed brick shelves. Tens of thousands of tablets. This was not a state archive, nor a royal library. The layout of the buildings and the content of the tablets pointed to a safer, almost comforting conclusion. This was a school, an aduba, the House of Tablets. The tablets found here covered everything from land sale contracts and delivery receipts to mathematics exercises and vocabulary lists. Among these countless fragments, one tablet bearing the catalog number CBS 10673 was packed up, shipped to Philadelphia, and entered into the archives. Early scholars dated it to around 1600 BCE. During the Old Babylonian period, they identified it as a literary copy, part of the standard curriculum for apprentice students. Its preliminary content appeared to describe the origin of the world and the founding of the first cities. Throughout the 20th century, both scholars and the public viewed this fragment as a reassuring testament to Sumerian education. It showed that ancient people went to school, copied texts, and cared about mythology, much like we do. It was a safe cultural artifact, reinforcing the belief that history followed a linear path of progress, and that ancient stories were merely naive attempts by our ancestors to explain the natural world. The clay tablet rested quietly on a shelf, protected by glass and indifference, completely harmless. The language of the dead. That sense of safety began to crack when Assyriologists, specialists in Mesopotamian studies, took a closer look at the textual structure of tablet CBS 10673. The anomaly was not in its outward appearance, but in the language used to write it. The tablet is dated to the 17th century, BCE, the Old Babylonian period. At that time, the language of daily communication, administration, and commerce in Mesopotamia was Akkadian, a Semitic language distantly related to Hebrew and Arabic, Sumerian. The language inscribed on this tablet had been dead in everyday life for centuries. No one spoke Sumerian in the marketplace. No one argued or bargained in it. During the Old Babylonian era, Sumerian functioned much like Latin in medieval Europe. It was an academic, esoteric, and extremely complex language reserved for a tiny elite, high priests, senior court officials, and those who held real power. Learning Sumerian was not mass education. It was a privilege and a burden imposed on those selected to operate the machinery of the state. This creates a logical problem. If this were merely a piece of popular mythology meant for entertainment, why copy it in a dead language that the general population could not understand? More importantly, when scholars examined the cuneiform signs under magnification, they noticed extraordinary precision. This was not the clumsy handwriting of a beginner. This was the work of a skilled hand, either an advanced student nearing graduation or a professional instructor. The text on tablet CBS 10673 is remarkably dense. The signs are tiny, packed tightly together across every square millimeter of clay, exploiting the surface to its absolute limit. The writer appears to be compressing an enormous volume of information into the smallest physical space possible. This behavior does not resemble the copying of poetic verses praising nature. It resembles the act of backing up critical data onto a secure medium. Why? In a school designed to train the future administrators of an empire? Was the mandatory exercise the meticulous copying of an ancient text written in a coded language? What were they trying to preserve? These questions led researchers into a dead end, the most crucial part of the tablet. The third column that contained the narrative climax was severely broken and eroded. Cracks ran across the clay like scars, erasing dozens of vital lines and leaving behind silent gaps that resisted every attempt at visual interpretation for decades. Scanning the dark zone, when traditional physical restoration reached its limits, and contextual guesswork became too risky, researchers turned to modern, non-invasive technology. Digital cuneiform projects, such as the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative, began applying advanced techniques to see what the human eye could not. An ultra-high-resolution photogrammetry scanning system was deployed. Combined with machine learning algorithms, this system does not read text the way we do. It scans the tablet surface from hundreds of different lighting angles, generating a three-dimensional topographic map accurate to the micrometer. It analyzes the depth of every indentation, the shadow of every carved stroke, and distinguishes between random scratches caused by time and deliberate wedge marks made by human hands. Beyond that, the AI was trained on thousands of other Sumerian texts, allowing it to understand grammar, syntax, and statistical patterns of word usage. When it encountered eroded areas where signs had nearly vanished, the algorithm calculated probabilities based on remaining spatial traces and broken strokes, proposing the most structurally plausible characters. The process was entirely objective. The AI knew nothing of mythology, held no religious beliefs, and felt no fear. It processed geometry alone. When the reconstruction was complete, the result displayed on the screen was a more continuous text than had ever been possible before, filling the silent gaps of the third column. The text begins with a list of cities: Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, Shuruppak. These were the first centers of power ever established. Then the tone shifts dramatically. There are no battle heroes, no celebratory festivals. The text describes a meeting of the Divine Assembly. The restored data clearly reveals the structure of this gathering. Present are An, the sky god; Enlil, god of wind and storms; Enki, god of water and intelligence; and Ninhursag, the mother goddess. They are not assembled to feast. They are voting. The subject of the vote is the fate of humanity. Tension rises in the laboratory as the translation of the decisive passage comes into view. The reason behind this vote of annihilation is not what anyone had predicted based on later religious texts. It is not moral. It is not spiritual. An administrative decision, the translation of tablet CBS 10673, supported by parallel fragments from other museums, exposes a deeply unsettling truth about the event later known as the Great Flood. In popular imagination, shaped profoundly by the biblical story of Noah, the Great Flood is portrayed as divine punishment for human corruption, sinfulness, and moral decay. Humanity became wicked, and God regretted having created it. Yet in the Eridu Genesis, a source that predates the Bible by thousands of years, the very concept of sin is entirely absent. Instead, the text uses a specific Sumerian term, rigmu, with an equivalent concept in Akkadian, meaning noise, clamor, or disturbance. The text explains that after the cities were founded, humanity multiplied rapidly, the land spread wide, people increased, and the world grew loud, compared to the bellowing of a wild bull. Enlil, the head of the executive authority of the Divine Council, convened the meeting for a strikingly simple reason. He could not sleep. Human noise had become unbearable, disrupting the quiet order of the heavens. Enlil addresses the council with chilling clarity. The noise of humanity has become too heavy for me. Because of their clamor, I am deprived of sleep. This is the central cognitive shock. The decision to destroy all of human civilization was an administrative decision. It was based on population management and the control of acoustic pollution. There is no moral judgment, no weighing of good and evil. Humanity is treated like an overgrown herd of livestock, too numerous, too disruptive, and in need of reduction to restore ecological order for the gods. The order of annihilation is approved by unanimous consent of the council. It is a legal document, an irreversible decree. Enlil issues the command, and the other gods are bound to comply, swearing not to reveal the plan to humanity. Human survival does not arise from repentance, but from a flaw in the bureaucratic system. Enki, the god responsible for creating humanity and perhaps viewing them as a valuable project, finds a way to bypass the rules, having sworn not to speak directly to humans. Enki goes to the place where Ziusudra, king and priest of the city of Shuruppak, resides. Enki does not speak to Ziusudra. He speaks to the reed wall of the house. Wall, listen. Reed wall, pay attention. Ziusudra, standing on the other side, overhears the message. Enki instructs him to dismantle the house, build a massive vessel, and preserve the seed of every living creature. Ziusudra survives not because he is the most righteous man, though the text does describe him as humble, but because he is the only one with access to insider information. He survives by knowing how to detect a data leak within the system. The curriculum of extinction, the horror of an administrative decision to erase humanity over something as trivial as noise, becomes far more disturbing when we consider where this text was preserved and copied. It was not kept in a temple for worship. It was not carved into a public monument as a warning. It was kept in a school. Thousands of similar fragments discovered within the same sediment layer in the scribal quarter of Nippur confirm that tablet CBS 10673 was not a unique work. It was part of a standardized curriculum. The young men who carefully copied each cold line describing annihilation were the most elite members of Sumerian and Babylonian society. They were future Dubsar, scribes, administrators, governors, and high priests. They were being trained to operate the machinery of the state, to manage grain reserves, supervise irrigation systems, and maintain urban order. The fact that the educational system required future leaders to memorize the procedure of their own extinction presents a profound cognitive problem. This is not religious education in the sense of devotion. It is education about the nature of power and the limits of control. By copying the story of Ziusudra, students were being trained in systems thinking. The civilization they were striving to build and manage was not an eternal structure. It was a conditional project. The shining cities, the complex canal networks, and the population boom they proudly administered all existed beneath a circuit breaker that could be flipped at any moment by higher authorities if operational metrics, such as noise or chaos, exceeded safe thresholds. The lesson of Enki and the reed wall becomes a foundational principle of intelligence and crisis management. A good leader is not someone who waits for official announcements, because when an official announcement arrives, it is already too late. The flood has begun. A good leader is someone who knows how to intercept leaked signals from the system, how to interpret anomalies in the environment, like whispers from a wall, and most importantly, how to make the decision to abandon fixed assets in order to preserve the core. This curriculum normalizes extinction. It teaches the elite that the collapse of a civilizational cycle is not a failure, but a feature of the cosmic management system. Erasing humanity to relieve pressure on the system is presented as a rational solution. The task of the ruler is not to resist it, but to prepare a contingency plan, the vessel, to restart the system once the purge is complete. The cuneiform marks on the clay tablet therefore do not contain the fear of someone praying for salvation. They contain the chilling calm of someone recording the minutes of a meeting about dissolving a corporation. Extinction has been documented, proceduralized, and placed into a textbook. And it is precisely this normalization that leads us toward the true fate of the survivors. A fate more tragic than death itself. Permanent isolation. When the storm of 7 days and 7 nights finally ended, and the sun, god Utu, shone once more upon a world washed clean by water, the story did not conclude with a celebration of life triumphant. The final lines of the Eridu Genesis, reconstructed from parallel fragments, describe a desolate scene and a final judgment reserved for Ziusudra, the sole survivor. Ziusudra opens the window of the vessel and looks out upon the stillness that blankets everything. The stillness Enlil had long desired and achieved at the cost of millions of lives. He steps outside and slaughters livestock as an offering. Enlil, after his initial fury over the leaked plan, reaches a compromise with Enki. The divine council summons Ziusudra to stand before them. There, they grant him a reward. Yet it is precisely this reward that reveals the ruthless nature of the reset mechanism. The text states clearly, they granted him eternal breath like a god. They sent him to live in a distant land where the sun rises. In Dilmun, to understand Dilmun and eternal breath in the administrative worldview of Sumer, we must discard the romantic lens of modern ideas about paradise. Dilmun is described as a land of purity, free from sickness and aging, yet completely separated from the black land of Mesopotamia where humans live and labor. Sending Ziusudra to Dilmun was not a promotion. It was a sentence of permanent exile. Why would the only individual who carried memories of the old world, of the flourishing civilization before the flood, and most critically, of the decision-making process behind humanity's annihilation, be forbidden from returning to guide the new human race? The answer lies in the system's demand for security. The new humanity, reborn from the seeds Ziusudra preserved, had to begin from zero. They needed to believe their existence was stable. If Ziusudra returned and told his descendants that their entire world was merely a trial version, subject to deletion if it grew too loud, social order would collapse under constant fear. Knowledge of the reset mechanism was a dangerous cognitive virus, incompatible with the stability of the new system. Ziusudra was therefore turned into a living archive. He was granted immortality to preserve memory, like a data backup, but was completely isolated in Dilmun, like a storage drive disconnected from any network, unable to transmit that memory to society. He became an eternal witness, and a silent one. Ziusudra's personal survival amounted to social death. He was not allowed to die and be released, nor allowed to live among others and share his knowledge. He was suspended at the edge of the world, watching the new humanity repeat old mistakes, multiply, and grow noisy once again, while he remained unable to issue any warning. You survive, but you no longer belong to this world, and as Ziusudra was taken away, humanity entered a new era wrapped in carefully engineered innocence, unaware of the invisible noise threshold hanging above their heads. The warning from Nippur. The disappearance of Ziusudra into the mist-bound land of Dilmun leaves us, the descendants of the new humanity, standing face to face with tablet CBS 10673. This small object of fired clay is no longer an inert archaeological artifact resting on a shelf at the University of Pennsylvania. It has transformed into a monitoring device left behind from a previous cycle, an abandoned user manual for the machine of civilization we are currently operating. What the scribal students of Nippur copied thousands of years ago is not a dead past. It is a description of an active mechanism. If we accept the text's premise that extinction is an automatic system response to overload indicators, population density, disorder, noise, then this story never truly ended. It has only been in standby mode. Our modern world, with 8 billion people, with megacities that never sleep, with data networks roaring day and night, is generating rigmu, noise and chaos, on a scale the kings of Eridu or Shurupak could never have imagined. We have exceeded the specifications of the old civilization by orders of magnitude. If the management system described on the tablet still operates, even as natural or social laws, then we are approaching, or may already have crossed, the activation threshold of another purge. The most terrifying legacy of the Eridu Genesis tablet is not its description of the flood, but the absolute silence that precedes it. No divine messenger appears in the sky to issue a warning. No ultimatum is delivered. There are only indirect signals, small fractures in the structure of society, whispers through walls that only figures like Ziusudra are able to hear. With all our satellites,